Hello, and good morning. It's still morning. My name is Steve Hansen. I'm the Vice Provost for International Affairs at the College of William and Mary, a partner in the Presidential Precinct. It's a great honor for me to be here and for our faculty team from William and Mary to join in this wonderful celebration of 75 years of the International Visitors Leadership Program and the Fulbright programs that are being celebrated today as well. They mean a lot to us at our universities. Let me say just a few words about the College of William and Mary. Since you're here at the beautiful campus founded by Thomas Jefferson, you all should know that Thomas Jefferson is an alumnus of the College of William and Mary. William and Mary was founded in 1693, so we're about to celebrate our 325th anniversary fairly soon. Second oldest university in the United States. Harvard is the oldest, we have to admit, so the quality level goes up after the first one. And one of the things that's most remarkable about the Presidential Precinct is that it's uniting an old wound for us. It's kind of healing. Because Thomas Jefferson actually originally came back to William and Mary after he'd been President of the United States and said, you know, my dream is to found a great Enlightenment university in America. And surely it should be William and Mary, my alma mater, founded by King William and Queen Mary. Unfortunately, our leadership at that point in Williamsburg said, no thanks, Thomas Jefferson. We are an Anglican school. We will stay Anglican. And so that was the end of that. And of course, now we have the University of Virginia. So here we are hundreds of years later, bringing Jefferson's legacy back together in this wonderful context. So it really is a great honor, and we're pleased you could all join us. I now have an additional wonderful honor, and that's to introduce our next speaker, Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne. I've gotten to know Baroness Nicholson over the last couple of years. We had a wonderful event with Prince Charles, and another one here at the University of Virginia, a fabulous conference dealing with the issues facing women and girls in Iraq and in Syria today. Her work is remarkable with these displaced people, and she's truly a moral leader for our time. She is formally the chairperson of the Ammar International Charitable Foundation, which served, as I said, displaced populations in the Middle East. And Baroness Nicholson was ennobled and became a member of the House of Lords in 1997, where she chairs the all-party Parliamentary Group for Foreign Affairs. So I think on so many levels, her work and her leadership intersects with the themes that have been discussed today. Please join me in welcoming Baroness Emma Nicholson.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just still good morning, not quite good afternoon, but thank you all very much indeed for allowing me to join you on a very important day. My name sounds a little bit crazy, Baroness Nicholson of Winterbourne. As a matter of fact, that's just the short version. The long legal version of my name is 19 words long, so please call me Emma. It's a great deal easier for everyone. As you have said, I represent today the House of Lords, which is the non-elected part of the British Parliament. So here I am, a politician, promoting democracy from a position that is completely undemocratic. And I rather enjoyed listening to Professor Zelikow. Indeed, I would adore to have a real good argument with them on the platform about what democracy really is. To me, it's not the ballot box. I've monitored something like 32 elections in all parts of the globe almost. I know very well how to twist and pervert the system on the ground in an election. I see democracy as a much more multifaceted exercise, which is not just democracy, it's the rule of law, it's the fundamental freedoms, it's justice, it's the fight against corruption, and indeed it's the free market. It's a mixture of things. And what's its purpose? Its purpose is to allow the voice of the people to come through and the people to change their leader. But it's the voice of the people that I fight for as a parliamentarian. Today, in this session, discussing the overall topic of leadership, my most profound view of leadership, of the key quality that all leaders reflect at some point or another in their career, and most of them for most of their career, and that is actually personal courage. I think if you have courage, it doesn't really matter whether or not you actually win. You must try to win if you think you've got the right ideas, of course, but winning is sometimes very, very far away. And sometimes the leader is almost alone. There are no followers of any sort. Sometimes they are slaving away at a corner at the humblest possible level, and it's the courage that will see them through. Today we're talking about the tripartite drawing together of three different core elements of any society. One is government, one is business, and one is non-governmental organizations. In my parlance, in my wording, that means democracy, it means the free market, and it means civil society. I'm lucky enough at the moment to have all three elements in my work. Indeed, I do that very, very deliberately, indeed, in all corners of wherever I work. And I'm working in a lot of places at the moment. I jotted it down for amusement. I'm working in Russia, a wonderful country, in Eastern Europe, many challenges, much opportunity, in Africa, in the Arabian Peninsula, the Persian Gulf, not an easy area, but absolutely enthralling with wonderful people. I'm also working in the Indian subcontinent and just a little bit in the Far East, and as often as possible in North America. And seeing in all those societies the qualities of the people is what, for me as a politician, makes my work really worthwhile. And because I am fundamentally a politician and have been all my life, I see the creation of good and stable law as the first thing to do when you're trying to support a people in trouble. The law, the law, the law. If you don't have the law, colleagues and friends, you've nothing at all to rely on. If you don't have some sort of a law in place, you've nothing to improve. If you don't have a law in place, you haven't got people who've argued about it. You haven't got democracy in any shape or form if you don't have a law. Laws are, of course, very often very weak, very feeble. They may not be implemented. And people often say to me, well, why bother to fight in this particular country to try to put a law in against corruption? You know perfectly well they're all corrupt anyway, they're not going to honour it. But dear colleagues, without the law, you've absolutely nothing to stand on at all. The law is the concrete platform on which everything else stands in a stable society. And it's true that most humans, most of the time, their constant search is for peace and stability so that they can flourish, raise families, develop their talents, and have a future. So I say the law is absolutely fundamental, the gangplank of everything. When you turn to business, I see business, the free market and private investment, as one of the most wonderful things that has come to life, particularly in the last 50 to 80 years. If you just take one small element, which is the World Bank, and look at the enormous amount of good that the World Bank has done absolutely everywhere, almost everywhere, the World Bank. Its commitment to public health, under John Wolfenson, I think it was a long time ago, that has transformed the lives of billions of people. And when you look at the World Bank and you look at its rule book, you see exactly why the businesses that operate under its umbrella do so much good themselves. Because the modern business development has moved right ahead from just making money out of the customer. The modern business has corporate social development. And watching corporate social development in action and helping it actually happen is incredibly exciting in societies that maybe don't have public health, maybe don't have access to education, maybe don't have a decent rule of law. It is miraculous what a long-standing, highly influential international company can do right there on the ground, not just taking money out of the customers, but supporting the customers' families, their villages, and their communities. It's a magnificent thing to watch. And I think much of the development of the modern world in terms of good things that have happened, in terms of public services, in terms of people's development, people's training, in terms of jobs and futures, what can you do without a job, for heaven's sake? Very, very little indeed, except just be a permanent victim. Much of that is due to corporate social development and to the examples that leadership is shown in businesses at all levels. And remember, you don't have to be the head of something to be the leader. You can be right at the very, very bottom, and you can be a leader. You can be a leader in setting standards. You can be a leader in rigor of approach. You can be a leader in hard work and dedication. You can be a leader in the way in which you treat your fellow work people. You can be a leader at any single level of society, of any company or anywhere, and so you should be. So don't just think that the person who hits the heights is the only leader. Every single person in every single organization is and must be a leader in some way or another. And that's why, in a sense, we're not competing against each other, we're competing against ourselves. You're trying to find who you are, what you are, and you're trying to see, how can I do that better? And that's leadership. That's why it needs courage, because that sometimes a bit dispiriting. Nobody says, well done. Nobody says, how wonderful. Nobody claps. Then people may even then turn their backs and walk away. And that's where personal courage is so important. Then we have the all-important thing, which is civil society. Ordinary people, you and me, and people we know, and our relations and friends and families and villages and towns. Civil society. A lot of civil society is represented these days by non-governmental organizations. But that's not entirely the case. If you look at some of the institutions that have been very long-standing, women's organizations, for example, men's organizations, clubs, associations, all sorts of things, even a football club, for example, all sorts of things are associations which bring us together. And they give us the opportunity to share our views, to grumble, to complain, to talk to each other, to learn from each other. And that's the real interaction of human beings. I started my working life after I trained as a musician as a computer software engineer. And for me, the huge excitement is to see how that very early decade of work has absolutely blossomed and flourished into mass communication. And I think that mass communication is the next step. If I say one is the development of business to become corporately socially responsible, then I think the next step has to be the capacity to have mass communication on everything, every second of every day, to be able again to be like a village. We used all to be very close in life until maybe the Industrial Revolution, and the industrialization drove people to cities and away from the country. Now we have all that potential again, massively exciting possibilities. And then could I say that I think the third great development that's happened over the last 40 or 50 years, maybe longer in some areas, and maybe only next week or next year or the one after in some other places, it's still in development, and that is the capacity for women to be part of almost everything now. We women, most of us have children. Most of us look after the elderly. Most of us have always traditionally cared for people at home or nearby home. And I don't think society would have flourished had that not been the case. But now, with the emancipation of women almost everywhere, the world has changed completely. And yes, it's not at all easy. I too fought hard to become a member of Parliament. I've been in Parliament now since, I think, 1987. And I became the vice chairman for Mrs. Thatcher, where my special responsibility was to bring forward women about 4 years before that, while I was a director of the Save the Children Fund. And yes, it wasn't easy. Not at all easy, because people were extraordinarily rude to women. When I started working on trying to get more women into Parliament, in the political party I was in, there were 650 men as possible candidates, and there were 8 women. And all 8 women, when I became vice chairman, came to see me and said, please let us off the hook. Please take our names off this list. None of us want to stand for Parliament. We're quite ancient. We've only agreed that our names should go forward so that the party doesn't look quite so out of date and antediluvian. So I got them off and then settled down and got many, many, many outstandingly good women involved. And I do think that I'm in some way responsible for having a huge volume of women now in the British Parliament, I hope in some other parliaments. It's not too difficult if you just remember 2 golden rules. The first one is that women my sex, unlike me, undervalue themselves consistently. Women grossly undervalue themselves. They don't understand how wonderful some of their talents are. And the other half of that, ladies and gentlemen, is that men, generally speaking, surprisingly enough, sometimes occasionally seem to overvalue themselves. So what you're trying to do is create an even platform. And in some society, of course, it's extremely difficult. But it's not impossible. And I have found some success in some countries where there were no women members of parliament at all, by dint of going and talking, say, to the president or the prime minister, and saying, well, look, this does look a bit odd. It looks a bit peculiar. It makes you look rather out of date. Why don't you just try having one or two women in? And surprisingly, those ladies will prove to be amazingly useful, positive and constructive, if you can give them enough confidence to get them to be courageous enough to put their names forward. But it's not easy. I mean, people are quite negative, and sometimes it's the women themselves who are negative. And that, I think, is the weakness of my sex. Where men come together and support each other, women tend to run alone. It's the men who are the dogs, as it were, and the women who are the cats, running in different directions. And I think the strength of womanhood now is the capacity to support each other and not merely to compete with each other. My work, therefore, rests upon the view that in order to effect change, we have to get in at all levels of society, whether we're men or women. And my philosophy, which seems to be effective, is that every single society contains people of outstanding value, and that the task is to try to find those people, and as others said earlier today, to help them with education, with training, with futures, with jobs, and absolutely everything. Because it may be that you've had those opportunities and they haven't. It's not the same, that, as what is being called intervention, which is bringing people in from outside. That doesn't really, in my opinion, help at all. What that does is diminish the local quality of people, whereas, in fact, what you must do is support the local quality of people. And what do these things really mean in practice, these points I've given you for a moment or two? Well, you mentioned the Amar Foundation. It's one outstanding example of how this can work. In the Amar Foundation, and I'm very happy indeed that we have Missy Cassels here today, who 12 of her family, including herself, have been students of UV. Amazing. And also, I think I've also got a colleague from London, a former BBC colleague, Rob Cole. And we work hard in the Middle East at the moment. We have plans to work elsewhere. And wonderful, talented people in Iraq, in Lebanon, elsewhere. We've developed very slowly and very steadily, with all of their qualities in the lead. We've developed about a couple of thousand staff strong at the moment, mainly in Iraq because of the troubles in Iraq, but not only. And at the moment, on very little funding, we have 1 million patients, and we have about 250,000 pupils of all ages who are being educated. And then we have a whole load more people who are in training and who are carrying out things like a religious tolerance program and so on and so forth. But I must say how much I admire State Department. Along with the World Bank, I think Washington does house some quite extraordinary institutions. And parce, Professor Zelikow, I think these institutions are immeasurably valuable. And I personally, as a politician, have no intention of letting them collapse. I think they're simply fantastic. And not just those two, but I must admit I did enjoy very much indeed listening to Evan Ryan this morning, because State Department is a very remarkable, far-sighted foreign policy ministry, very remarkable indeed. I loved listening to Professor Zelikow. I want to have a nice political debate with him. But I must say I want to thank Jim Murray tremendously for his leadership in setting up the presidential precinct. It was such a joy to be with you last year when you had Prince Charles. I like the photograph behind. And you had us all discussing the Magna Carta. I'm not at all who shouldn't really be asking us this year to discuss Shakespeare. It's his 400th birthday, I think on something like April the 23rd. And that's a very great excitement for all of us, one of the great playwrights of the globe. But discussing here leadership under your leadership is something very special indeed. And incidentally, I had the joy of having your president, Mrs. Sullivan, with me in London last week when you came over with you. You came over, Jeff, didn't you? It was absolutely wonderful. Leadership, therefore, you've got a table of leaders here on my left, each of whom have already spoken. You've got a whole load of leaders here in this room, but we also have about 1 billion people, don't we, in the globe, who have almost nothing in front of them, almost nothing on their plates to eat, almost nothing on their backs to wear, almost nothing over their heads to shelter them from the rain, from the sun, from the monsoon, and from the snow. So, dear colleagues, dear friends, we have a massive job ahead. I'm around. If anything I can do in my life helps you, drop in on my House of Lords place, send me an email. I'll give you any advice, any kind help I can. But just remember, what you're doing, whether you're at any level in society at the moment, matters deeply. There are remarkably few of us who have the opportunities that we have in this room. I know we're all astoundingly grateful for everything we're given, but we must remember that we just remain a tiny fraction of humanity, and most of the rest of our fellow men and women have no opportunities at all. Colleagues and friends, I wish you well. There's a heck of a lot to do. Thank you.